The sun was rising on February 27th, 2017. Just a mere 173 years before this, the Dominican Republic gained independence from Haiti, and only 15 years prior, a Muslim mob was torching a train killing 59 Hindu pilgrims. But comparing these states to the first, they all seem quite minuscule, for on this day, a piece of art like no other was released. Stories Untold. This game was developed by No Code with a wonderful story written by John McKellen and was published by Devolver Digital. That's right, the same Devolver Digital from Fall Guys. We open the game and are shown a menu with 4 episodes. Now this video will be split up into 2 different parts. Firstly, we're going to dissect each of the episodes and come to senses with the story, and in the second part I will share my in-depth thoughts on the game as well as any final thoughts I have toward the developers. I hope you enjoy this video as I put a lot of time and effort into it, and actually really hope you like it. The first of the episodes is unlocked while the ladders stay secure, pushing for a chronological progression. In the background we can see a wooden table with a couple of VHS tapes piled on top of each other. You can only see the top one, and it clearly reads, Stories Untold. Your only choice to progress is to click on the first episode, The House Abandoned. An intro starts as arpeggiated synths kick in. We see various objects float past an 80s style wallpaper such as a framed photo of 2 kids, a video camera, and a tape player, with one labeled The House Abandoned and side ready to play. When we enter the game, we see a desk in front of us with an old computer that is starting up. A game slowly renders in as your hardware pushes itself to spit out the colors and shapes. The House Abandoned, it reads, similarly to the name of the episode. The game opens and we can see it's a text-oriented interactive adventure. Everything seems pretty simple and standard as we turn on the generator and enter the house. We go upstairs to find an old computer that our father left on the desk for us. We set it up and now see a game. The House Abandoned. That's weird. That's what we're playing right now. To progress forward, you put in the game. The power shorts and everything in the house is dark except for your computer screen that is bathing in static. A crash of lightning and your computer and alarm are back. The game starts up again, but this time something's different. The title screen loads in, but it's upside down now. When the color overlays, in black and white it reads, Get Out, all over the screen. Although you are signaled to retreat, you stay put, petrified by the lone screen that is lighting up your room. I feel like even in this modern age, most people have been in a situation similar to this. Maybe you're sitting alone in your dark room, playing Amnesia, looking for Stefano. Your graciously cut big toe hooks onto your power cord, viciously ripping it out of the socket. The room goes dark. You are left there alone with your thoughts, no sound but that of the dwindling amount of cars outside your window. You rush to get things plugged back in, just for the uncomfortable change to go away. That's scary enough, without the game being warped and telling you to run away with as much power as it can. As much as a huge loud jump scare can make you jump, a lot of the time the suspense of complete silence can be a lot scarier. The text starts, but the story is different. Before you were excited to be back to your idyllic childhood home, but now the home is neglected and you're disgusted to be near. The instructions are still similar, however, as you grab the key and a note from the glove box. Instead of the note being a nice letter from your dad, though, it now reads Get Out over and over as you're once again pleaded to leave. Everything in this world is darker. The atmosphere is so much different with the whole room being lit by just your computer screen as the game warps around you. It forces you to focus directly on the game, immersing you further as the suspense builds up around you of what will happen next. You go around to turn on the generator for the house, commenting that the house looks abandoned and without love. For some odd reason, when the generator is switched on, the lights in your room also come on. Looking around, you can see that every choice has been made to respond differently to this new grim world. Finally, you reluctantly enter the home. This is when we realize something. We're not alone. When we type to enter the worn down home, if you can even call it one at this point, we hear the door slam shut. It is clear now that our moves are influencing someone else's decisions. The alarm clock in your room goes off as a computer shares that the alarming sound has alerted the person downstairs. They now know that you're here too. Somehow, through sending a message on the computer, the alarm stops. You are part of the game. Although your character downstairs is unsettled and disturbed, he continues on. You have the option to check out various places in the house. You go to the kitchen. Everything is rusted and broken, with a carcass being on the table. Disgusting as it is, you traverse further to find in blood writing on the wall, 1986. You've no use for that combination of numbers, yet. But as you read it, it appears in front of you in your room, alluding to its later use. In every room you enter downstairs, the game comments on the note's burning and mentally destroying properties. I tested it out, and every different room you enter, the note will read something different, although some rooms it won't let you read the note, as it may be bleeding in the hallway or covered in ink in the bathroom. You now choose to go upstairs as your real self can hear the old stairs creak. Then, the phone starts to ring. When you type in to pick it up, voices spill out into the bedroom, loud enough for you to hear in the hallway. A raspy and distressed voice whispers frantically for you to leave the house. When you're playing this calm game on full volume in the dark with just a smooth arpeggiator running through your headphones as a clackety keyboard types away, these ear-piercing noises can really wake you up. The almost unintelligible scramblings of the person on the other line are so much for your brain that the game won't even let you move on until the phone is hung up. You are now again let to explore the house further. You see old family pictures on the wall, but sinisterly, all the faces have been cut out. Looking over to your sister's old bedroom, it's been boarded up. This doesn't make sense. Earlier her room was beaming with trophies and childhood memories, and also strangely a closet full of similar pictures of a lone road. Your room, however, has only been bolted with a 4-digit combination lock. As you close in, you think back to any combination you could have possibly found during your adventure. Only one comes to mind. 1986. You're in. Now, one thing I thought was really interesting about this part is to get into the room, you're forced to go through a text cutscene over and over, solidifying your choice, making you even more skeptical and increasing the suspense of what may happen next. All the way through clicking the lock and opening the door, sound and visual clues show you you're getting closer to meeting one another. When you finally enter the room, you see a person sitting there at the computer desk. It tells you the clock reads 9999. Another thing it says, giving a hint to a progression in the game, you grip the note tightly. You decide to take a final look at the note, and it's changed again. It now reads,
I'm sorry, Jennifer. I'm sorry, Mum. I'm sorry, Dad. You haunt me every step I take, even in this place. It was out of my hands, but still you punish me. I can be with you now.
You have to end this. Now. There's no choice to leave the room. You must proceed forward. This is your destiny, and you can't change it. The only decision is to literally end it. You type it in. E-N-D. You're called pathetic, forced to comply, telling the world it's all your fault. You can try and plead innocent, but it won't let you. It knows the truth. And darkness. During the first episode, we can already see how this perfected style will lead us through an assortment of puzzling positions, but will give us just enough hint for the slightly brighter-minded to traverse through. The style fits so perfectly and really helps the playing experience. Although this first episode was rather linear, with one leading path, this is very purposeful and is to create a more solid story, as for you to see the right things while still being able to slightly rock the boat. The switch between a beautiful nostalgic overworld of love and memories and the dark, destroyed, and depressing underworld, making everything seem upside down from the prior, and although the second may seem completely backwards and twisted compared to the first, you may come to find that it's quite the opposite. You slowly fade into a room which looks to have all the high tech of an 80s secret lab. Computers, cameras, audio equipment, and some unknown and freaky looking devices that you not dare tamper in the real world. Just as you're coming to your senses, you hear a voice.
This is subject 12-19-86-23, new session entry. We have myself, Dr. Alexander leading, assisted by Dr. Williams, and in the lab itself, our volunteer, Mr. Asian. We have artifact 23 in the chamber, recovered from crash site B. At the moment it appears inert, showing no signs of activity.
You're given instructions on how to handle some sort of artifact that's assumingly in the chamber at the other desk. Although we're not given much of a storyline to infer what's going on, we've been given our instructions and we should probably just proceed to see where this takes us. We are given a series of tests to do on the thing in this chamber. Every command is ordered to us from a separate room.
Okay, let's begin.
We start out with an X-ray, but before switching to the correct setting, we can see through the camera that what we're experimenting on seems to be a human heart. When X-rayed, however, it seems to contain a small white sphere. The other scientists talking to us tell us it's flatlined with absolutely no activity. After this, we are told to use a low-powered laser on the specimen with no result. Luckily, as we up the ante on the laser, a signal starts to form.
Okay, we have a reaction of some sort here, a weak signal.
Finally, getting to a laser blue in color, there's a pulse. Our possible colleague, though skeptical, expresses to move on forward.
Would you look at that?
Our next trial involves sound frequencies, and although the experiments are seemingly becoming more daring, we have no choice but to comply. Our first test at 250 Hz was so weak it slipped under the radar, but when we doubled this, the heart seems to react. Not to the boss's expectations, we push further. Switching from a sine wave to a square wave proves to get a better reaction, but still not up to par. We're told that although we may be uncomfortable, we must keep going.
I know this might seem uncomfortable or dangerous, but you need to trust us and keep going.
And at this point it seems more that we're disposable, and maybe there's a reason for us to be uncomfortable. After pushing the heart to its limits once more at quadruple the original hertz, it can't take it. The heart explodes with a room-vibrating boom, and all that's left is the white core we spoke of earlier. So wait, what the fuck is going on? Episode 1 was all about family and things based in observable reality, and now we're part of a crazy science experiment? How could this even possibly come together? It may seem this way right now, but if we proceed, soon everything will come together. Apparently, this explosion of the heart we just got pumping is what we wanted, because soon after we're notified that we're doing great. Now it's time to drill right through to the core. Even though we're getting more skeptical by the second, it seems everything is in order, so best to stay calm and keep following instructions. As the drill starts to penetrate our lab rat, the worst possible situation comes to play, so we think. The power shorts on everything that was just on, and you're now in complete darkness. Well, almost. You still have the vitals monitor and a small overhead light. This is until the chamber starts emitting a blinding blaze of white. We're now told that the situation is in fact under control, and we can keep continuing. Our next task is, well, to open up the chamber. Yes, the one with the thing that just broke the drill and is now emitting a bright white light. As it slowly creaks open, the sphere of white starts floating towards us as we can see now that it's undoubtedly what was emitting the light. The scientist tells us we can do this and
It's time to remember.
The white light starts flashing red as it blocks our whole view. It sits there, and boom! It jumps at us as a few of different symbols crosses our view. We fall down and coming back up are now bleeding from the nose with blurry vision. We're told once again to stay calm, even though we're being infiltrated by a floating sphere. As we recompose, our colleague informs us that the memories from this being has been transferred into us, and that the sphere is somewhat like a black box used on planes to figure out what happened before they crashed. A connection starts to form between the sphere and the computer in front of us. As we look into the light once more to gain more information, we can barely see some different things through bright lights such as a moon, a camera, and an eye. Some of these things could have come into the being's memory more recently, such as just seeing our eye and seeing the camera pointing into the chamber. The moon, however, must have been a further memory. Gaining this new information, we're now shown a new tech space adventure, one to now traverse this new futuristic plane. Already we can see that this is nothing like our first encounter with a game like this, as it is based in a spaceship that seemingly crashed into a planet, and judging by the mention of a cryogenic chamber, we are following someone with knowledge further than any of the persons in episode 1. We slowly find our way out of the spaceship, encountering the new environment around us, a shuttle that's falling apart at the seams. We are stopped a couple times through our trip to upload further information into us. On our second data transfer, we're told this organ came from the leader, leading to more information being accessible. If we look at the most recent events, we can infer now that the heart, the one encasing this white beaming sphere, was taken from a person, and by that logic, we can then further infer that the white black box was inside of his heart? An insurance of sorts. From all of this, we can gather that some sort of crash site must have been found, and that this isn't the only testing room. When doing our next data transfer, we see a few things now and much more clearly than the prior experience. We see a momentary flash of some sort of motherboard looking object and a person in a spacesuit that eventually draws closer. After you exit through the airlock, you're forced to move pieces of wreckage in order to keep moving forward, as the scientist tells you that this is where he was found by them. When you crawl through, you're attacked by lights that now surround you. You see a figure approach, not unlike the earlier vision. When you start to approach back, another data transfer is needed. You're told that many of their subjects never make it this far and to be proud of your accomplishment. Through this next data transfer, you see a few more peculiar things. To start, you see a figure again, then flashing through a lab, and a lab name tag that says Dr. Daniel Alexander, with a tag of US Department of Experimental Sciences, then a man in a gas mask, a vitals monitor, a series of cords seeming to come all together in one place. Then you're back. At this point, things are starting to come together again. Still not between these first 2 episodes, but standalone, they're building their stories. Through the memories we just saw, it seems that the person who was in the crash is probably here now, and that sphere has recorded everything up to this point. You've now seen every trauma this person has faced, every pain this person has been put through in this lab. Your character now awakes in the lab. He claims that we are all as one, and we are all in unison. Upon looking around, we can tell that this is a lab room, and the cords we saw earlier are draped from the machinery over into our chest. The scientist is confused.
This doesn't add up. We didn't put this entity in quarantine. It expired at the crash. Whose memories are these? When did this happen?
The vessel that this robot came from died at the crash, and was not taken here, but through further thinking, we now know what's going on. Thinking back to what your controllee just stated, we are all as one, we are all in unison. There are now possibly more people who had these things inside of them, and they are connecting together, sharing like a network. The wires going out into your chest are pumping black liquid, but there's no telling if it's going in or coming out. You decide to remove the wires, only for an alarm to start blinking throughout the facility. This is happening now. We are controlling them. Upon taking the wires out, the only logical decision is to leave. After typing this, a new data transfer is required, but the scientist observing is becoming more skeptical of your power.
Mr. Asian, I need you to stop what you're doing, please.
You're told to stop, but the power overtakes you. You've been controlled by these people, made to do what they wouldn't, and now you control the situation. You rebel against his decision and proceed with the transfer. What you see in this next transfer is, well, different from the other ones. Firstly, it seems like you're being pushed on a hospital bed through a door. Then, we cut to a long shot of you on the ground, in the middle of what we can assume is a road surrounded by bushy trees. The only sound is that of a turn signal going off from your car with an accompanied flashing light. You then see a picture of a dead girl in a body bag, then looking through the doors of a building, possibly again a hospital. Those things remind us of something, but we'll come back to it later. We go into the next room, and the door locks behind us. We find a device on the desk from our ship. It's told to us that it's an access code terminal for a wide connection, allowing commanders to commandeer other hosts. It's time to use these codes. Upon using the terminal, we're shown a series of hieroglyphics, some of which we can change. We're once again pleaded with to comply with their orders, as our rebellion could be catastrophic.
Mr. Asian, please. We deeply regret what we have put you through, but please understand it was for the greater good. We had to know more. Rebelling now could be catastrophic. We don't know what this might do to you in the long run.
The symbols used to work on the device can be found by looking in the light of the orb again. Once we type it, we can see different lights scanning and coming towards us. A new orb enters the room, then another. More and more as we're told by the scientist, it's over. We are now surrounded by these robots as they all approach us. We go towards the closest one before they all turn around simultaneously to scan out the window as the scientist pleads once more to no avail. Everything goes black as he says,
"One day, Mr. Asian, this will haunt you."
This episode was phenomenal. It offered more pieces to play with than the first, and it built up an opposing story for us to ponder. The voicing was done really well, and the bringing back of the text adventure was really interesting. Similarities are slowly starting to form, and the story is amazing with really interesting takes on things, like the futuristic black box. The puzzles, although rather straightforward, were really cool and brought an interesting piece to this episode. Now to come back to the odd one out of the data transfers. Something seemed all too familiar about the placement and scenario. Firstly, let's talk about what seemed to be the car crash memory. The trees and scenery reminded me oddly enough of episode 1, and if we think back to the sister's room, similarities start to flood in. In the overworld, her closet was filled with pictures of a lone road. This might be a stretch, but could this possibly have been referencing the car crash in the Vision? Somehow, a common person's memory has entered these alien robots. Could it be the memories of our character? It is unknown at this point, and we've no choice but to move forward. You're in what looks to be a remote tower amongst a snowstorm. Your fellow transmitters 1 and 2 report that your mic must not be working. There's been a distress call. So apparently we're going to be decoding some things, and we have a set of instructions. Before we continue, I'd like to point out that the name displayed under user is J. Asian. This proves that we are the same person as in the last episode, as we were referred to as Mr. Asian. But it still doesn't explain how we would get ourselves in such extreme situations, and how we could have gotten out of the robotic takeover of the last episode. Nonetheless, it's best to stick to our orders, and not to keep the distress signals waiting. You're given a frequency on screen. Using this frequency on the radio to your right, as well as a specific transmission setting, you can get a number code to log in. After logging in, you're given a code word to look up in your microfilm handbook. Looking at these code names given in the handbook, they're pretty peculiar. Some places, some names, some words like sacrifice, whiskey, abacus, to name a few. Although this is a bit strange, it's nothing really to talk about yet. As we progress through the minigames, some things start getting more difficult, adding in variable manipulation and such, but nothing that really progresses us further. On our third transmission, 2 asks 1,
1, what does GCS mean?
I thought this was interesting as it's never really explained, so I searched it up. Apparently, GCS stands for a Glasgow Coma Scale. It's a scale used to measure the level of a person's consciousness after a coma. 2 says E1, V1, M1, assuming this translates to eye-moving, verbal, and motor response. On the scale we can tell that this patient has no response to anything in any of these categories and is in a severe comatose state. Keep this in mind as we keep going through this episode. Soon after, 1 informs us that we were apparently supposed to hear from the supply team 3 days ago. They haven't sent anything canceling their trip either. We're told to track down a distress signal from the team. And on our way, if you tune into frequency 8080, you can hear a lady talking about an epidemic that's apparently happening.
An emergency broadcast received from Madrid confirms the epidemic has traveled across the Atlantic. They have been sighted, connecting to central population centers and beginning what is being described as a removal.
This could explain the distress calls we've been answering. Once we get to the right number, the signal from the supply team plays. They tell us their team name, 20F, remember that. And that they've been trapped in a storm, not able to get to us or get back home because something has messed with their GPS signal. To end the distress call, he tells us that the center of New York has fallen and everyone there is now gone. He says something is coming and to be ready. 20F out. So far, the similarities between the first 3 episodes is minimalist, with the only one between the second and third being a shared last name. 1 now tells us that he's gotten a call from another station that we need to lock up and stay in our cabins. 2 seems skeptical and wants an explanation, one that 1 can't give her.
What are you talking about?
We decide to just continue processing distress signals as we don't have much else to do. 1 tells us, as long as the GCS number is going up, we're helping a lot of people. Following by 2 says, it was 3 last time, it's 6 this time. Apparently these puzzles we're solving are helping someone through their coma, as the GCS is being raised by our code solving. We have no clear sign of who's in this coma and how this could be helping them, but we're sure to find out soon enough. 2 tells us she sees some sort of cabling above our cabin before we hear a big thump on the roof that then slides across and off. Now 1 is claiming to hear similar things as he frantically whispers. He tells us they're here, as 2 getting more frustrated asks what he's talking about. 1 tells us we'll be fine before going completely offline himself. With only 2 of us now, we decide to take another distress call. We're told GCS is at 7, with eyes being non-responsive, verbal being perfect, and motor being unresponsive. A couple other stations radio in as we pounce on the most recent distress call. 4 tells us he sees something out in the storm, while another, assumingly 5, tells him no one is out there. In the most recent of the GCS signals, we're made to find out a code that leads to the name Alexander. Seems like just another code name, but we've seen this one before. On the name tag at the lab in episode 2. 4 radios over to us now and tells us under no circumstances should we go outside. 5 now tells us that the cords 2 saw over our tower are ripping stations out of the ground and have already taken station 6. After this, station 2, referring to you as James, tells you need to realign the transmitter outside.
We need to go out to it.
Before you can make your choice using better judgment, you're pulled out of your chair and dragged out of the door into the snow. This is the first point in the game where you really get to control the character. Now, I couldn't find any video evidence of this, but on my first ever playthrough back a couple years ago, I had a glitch at this part that made it so my cursor was still moving around on the screen even though I was stuck into first person mode. Probably fixed at this point, but just wanted to note. You walk through a barren Arctic scene, crossing different areas and rooms. Once you get over to the transmitter, you needed to turn on the generators to turn back on everything in the tower. After you turn everything back on, what sounds like a foghorn is sounded as you make your way back to your station. Making your way back, you receive many increasingly disturbing messages from 2.
I can't feel my legs, James. I'm so tired.
Weirdly, you come across a car crash in the midst of the snow. More and more things are starting to come together as the world reveals itself around you. 2 pleads further for our return as another voice, male this time, assures her that we're coming back.
He's coming back.
You start hearing whispers all around you as reality slowly melts. The male voice speaks again, but this time it's clearly recognizable.
James, everyone is waiting on you. You need to wake up.
It's a scientist from episode 2, who we can assume from the name tag we were shown is Dr. Alexander. He then tells us that
These machines, they are your lifeline.
keep these 2 statements in mind as we get back to our station. Upon returning to our tower, we can see the cords that 2 is talking about. A huge vacuum-looking organism coming from the sky has clamped down on our station with a series of cords coming from out of it. Although we know from previous experience what's likely about to happen next, pulled out of the ground like Station 6, we have no choice but to re-enter our station. When we open the door, however, things have changed. Our station is now transformed into the room from the first episode. You can see everything on the desk and it is clear what it is. As you enter, the screen goes black and we're told,
Welcome back.
At this point, we can proudly make an assumption that we are the ones in the coma. We still don't know exactly how we could have entered this situation, but looking at the car crash we just passed and the memory in episode 2, we can kind of piece together that we could have possibly been part of this crash. This episode was really interesting. The beginning could have been perceived as a bit slow, as not much is going on, but the puzzles were really fun and well thought out. The incorporation of GCS, something that most people may not know about, but something that would come up lots around a person recovering from a coma, was very well placed, adding handfuls of realism. Many people hated the first-person aspect of this episode, writing that it ruined the rest of the game, but I disagree. Although it was a change of pace from the other episodes, looking back to the GCS, it kinda shows that our patient is slowly gaining more and more abilities. Starting off just being able to type, to being able to look around, to being fully mobile, we can see the steps being taken by our character towards recovery. This is a very big change of scene and a fascinating episode, bringing the end that much nearer. Episode 4 begins similar to the rest, with the story's Untold intro. One that seems unbearable at this point, as we're forced to sit through the... What? What just happened? We zoom out to see a plethora of different magazines on the table, with the TV in front, and a lone VHS labeled Stories Untold. What sounds to be some sort of caretaker or nurse is now taking us down to the observation room. We're wheeled through what looks to be a hospital as we can faintly see different posters on alcoholism and driving under the influence. We now enter the observation room. Have scene play out. Do that, Jack. Just put it in the video.
Okay, are we through in the next room? Just relax and we'll get started in a moment.
Right, Mr. Asian, now are you ready? Just hit record on the tape deck in front of you when you're ready. This is subject 12-19-86-23, new session entry. We have myself, Dr. Alexander leading, and in a room we have our patient, Mr. James Asian. As we know, James has recently recovered from a 2-week coma following his accident. In our last 3 sessions, James's attempts to recollect events of the accident seen him merging his memory with his imagination. These episodes have always ended in panic, and we've had to terminate the session abruptly. Let's try and do this one better, James. So when you're ready, let's bring this back. I know how difficult this must be, but you can do this. James, it's time to remember. Your mind, it's like a conscious black box. It can show you your memories. Look into it. In your most recent episode, you recalled a false memory of a remote weather station. You were isolated from the rest of the world, locked inside your coma. We interacted with you daily, encouraging you to wake. Your family would do number puzzles with you. Anything really to bring you back. People needed answers, James. Do you remember?
The doctor talks about how they stayed in contact with me, like my colleagues 1 and 2, and my family played number puzzles with me, like the distress signals that we did so many of. Another reference to the number puzzles is in the microfilm handbook, a code word, abacus. As we're brought back to our most recent episode, we're now given a new signal to decipher. When we get to the message, however, it's not a robotic voice like before. It's a raspy man's voice, repeating the numbers. One number that's actually come up a lot in this game so far is 1986. It was the door code in episode 1 and has been in multiple number sequences in episode 3. This could possibly be the year this happened, or a birthday maybe. Nonetheless, it's an important date. Our code word is report, but the handbook is different. It's changed from a code word instruction manual to a single police report. Closer to the top, we can see 20F, Fatal Accident. Where have we heard this before? In episode 3, the supply team repeats multiple times that their code name was 20F. Upon further research, you can determine that 20F means fatal accident in police language. As you keep reading, you can see that James was in the car with another passenger, his sister, when an out-of-control blue sedan swerved into them, colliding and injuring him and his sister, her taking the brunt of the impact and sadly passing. We can see another similarity between the crash and episode 3 if we look at the brief, stating that the driver of the blue sedan had a strong scent of whiskey with an empty bottle of it beside him. In episode 3, whiskey was a code word, obviously having heavily impacted him. After completing this distress call by inputting the circled statements, we tune into 7000 FM. Here, one of the blue sedan's driver's friends is testifying against the situation.
It's not like him. At all. I've worked with Officer Hennings for 6 years and not once have we even talked about alcohol. Drunk driving. He was a father, a husband, he was fine. No way he caused this. It's him, this Haitian guy. He's got something to hide.
We're led back into some sort of storage area, finding out quickly that it's inside the hospital. The text-to-speech games seem to have come to life, as our every move is narrated by a fast-typing text. As you navigate through your current home, you quickly discover this is built on memory, only a mere creation of your mind. Upon entering the TV room, you figure out that Stories Untold is nothing but an opinionatedly trash horror compilation, but as it's the only film they have, it has occupied a lot of your time. When entering the waiting room, you're told you feel a presence right behind you. I probably would have left this out, but my game glitched when this text popped up and it created an invisible barrier under me, popping me up and making me unable to walk through that area for a couple seconds. I don't know if this was something they removed or just a huge coincidence. To end the scene, you walk through a door into a bright light and are suddenly back to episode 2. But your reason for being there is different.
Okay, we have a 22-year-old male just brought in from a vehicle collision. He was awake and mobile at the scene, but collapsed on arrival to the emergency ward. The other passengers died in the accident.
Instead of doing tests on an alien black box, you're being defibrillated, having just been brought back from the scene of the crash. You're made to control the defibrillator yourself, but I'm almost positive they have doctors who do it in real hospitals. Now, instead of the camera pointing at the heart, it's pointing at you. You're the subject, you're being tested. This scenario must have had a large mental toll on James, as it's the location for an entire episode. Soon, you're made to drill into your head, as you have a hemorrhage and your brain is in need of release. This is a part of the game where I can confidently say they did a bad job. They did a good job on all the other parts, 100%, but this part was just kinda silly. You turn on the drill and it starts sliding towards the container like in episode 2, but when you look to your left, it's actually sliding towards you, floating in the air. It looks shit, and it seems like a far-fetched explanation for the chamber setup and why it was ingrained in his brain. Otherwise, this level is done pretty well, and it serves an interesting explanation. After we're drilled, everything goes black, and we wake up to our alarm, back in the house abandoned. It loads up exactly the same, and one of the only distinguishable differences between this scene and in episode 1 is that you're facing a different angle. In episode 1, you were at a straight-on angle to the desk, and now you're slanted, slightly more towards the computer screen. When the text starts, we're told that it's New Year's Eve, and tomorrow you leave on a 6-month trip abroad with your friends. All your family has thrown you a going-away party in your honor. This could possibly be the night leading up to the crash, and if so, makes you feel horrible for James. He's just about to start his life, go on a trip with his friends, make memories. His entire family is there at his side, and the world is his oyster. And this man, in the blue sedan, supposedly took it all away. Another thing of note is in this statement it brings up your sister, Jennifer. The victim of the crash now has a name, and we know who died beside you at the supposed hands of a stranger. The name Jennifer also brings up another interesting connection, as one of the code words back in episode 3 was none other than Jennifer. As we push through the crowded party, Jen signals over to us and we go to talk. This is actually one of the only places in the game where you have a choice of what to say, as she asks if you're enjoying the party. You can say yes or no, although it results in the same answer anyways. As she walks away, you take a swig of your drink. Moving on, you enter the utility room. It is full of fine wines and whiskeys and is normally off limits to you. You see a bottle with a ribbon and a card next to it. Upon reading, you deduce that it's a gift from your father, a 25-year-old double malt whiskey. As you leave the room, you take multiple swigs of your new best friend. Now talking to your father, he tells you he's proud of you. Everyone seems to be. Your accomplishments do not go unacknowledged. You go back into the hall and... What is that? It's Jen, covered in blood. No one else notices as your eyes lock. Blood is dripping down her face, mixing with tears. No matter what you say, no matter what you do, the same sequence will play out. I'm sorry, I don't understand. 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 The picture we saw earlier in episode 2 briefly during a memory forms onto her screen. A girl in a body bag. Could this be Jen? If so, why would she be taking out on us? Another question, if this is the night of the accident, how come James is drunk when it was clearly stated that the other driver was? Along with the computer, I'm starting to not understand. There's something at play here that we haven't been told. We cut to a hospital waiting room where a lady repeats a statement.
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
We tried our best, Mrs. Asian, but her injuries were too severe.
No, I don't understand. I was just talking to her.
I'm afraid Jennifer passed away before we could get to her in surgery. We did the best we could. I'm so sorry.
Where is she? Let me see her.
Please, Mrs. Asian, take a seat.
I don't want to take a seat. Let me talk to her. Now.
I'll arrange for you to see her. In the meantime, James is in recovery. He's stable for now.
I don't want to see him.
Mrs. Asian, assumingly James and Jennifer's mother, is talking to a doctor at the hospital. Her daughter is dead, while her son is stable, but she refuses to go see him, signaling some sort of grudge that we're unbeknownst to. You wake back up, startled, and everything melds back to normal. It was just a vision. While you're trying to gain back your composure, your sister interrupts and asks for a ride home. No matter your better judgment, you don't have a choice. You have to drive Jen home, and we both know you're drunk. Mind you, this was in the 80s, and driving under the influence was a lot more common with a lot less bad stigma around it. Looking at the driving drunk poster back in the hospital, that's probably the only place you would find a poster like that back then. In fact, in the peak year of 1983, 1 out of every 80 drivers in the US had driven drunk. You can find your keys in the living room, in your coat. Upon entering the kitchen, even your dad tells you to drive home your sister, only to take it slow as you're drunk. When you get out to your car, a very long sequence plays out, dragging out the fact that you're drunk. Finally, after mindlessly fumbling the keys and putting the car in gear, we're on the road. Everything goes red. You know you shouldn't be driving, but it's happening anyways. You need to ask your sister for directions at one point, then you continue on your way. You start to speed up now that you're on the open road, startling Jen. She asks you to slow down, but you have no choice. If you type speed up, it says, I went faster, didn't I? And if you try to slow down, it corrects you. That's not what really happened though, is it? Jen is hitting your arm, yelling at you. Crazy sister. Strange. There's a set of headlights coming directly at you, but really slow. Like slow motion. He didn't cause this crash. You did. It was all your fault. It was all our fault. It was all my fault.
James, for fuck's sake, pull over! James!
It was at this very moment, wasn't it, James? The moment you lost it all. Your sister, your parents, yourself. And then you made it worse. Go on. Show us what you did.
You've crashed. Your whole world is upside down. You need to get out of this car, now. I tried to save the sister, but the memory pushes to stay true to what really happened. It won't let you. It tells you you need to save yourself. Every breath brings pain to your chest. The text-based adventure in episode 2 was based on this exact moment. For them, the ship crashed and was recovered by bright lights surrounding them. But really, it was a car, and those bright lights are those of an emergency response team, and they're coming quick. Your life cannot be ruined by this. You still have the whiskey and your dad's note in your hand, which is ever changing. At this time it reads, "Get through this, James. I don't care if you want to or not. You know what you need to do. Before the police get too close, and with your last ounce of adrenaline, you pour the remainder of your whiskey on the driver in the blue car, placing the empty bottle in his passenger side. The police are now here. A figure stands before you, beckoning you to approach. We now hear Jen's voice as the intensity of her situation is increasing.
I know you. I know you're tearing yourself apart over it, but no matter what you keep telling yourself, you have to listen to me. That accident, that poor man, me. You have to remember, it was all your fault.
Everything comes into fruition. We know the truth, they know the truth.
How you left me there.
We're led by orbs through the hospital as an extreme set of sounds play in our ears. We're led to the observation room, the place where every single one of these episodes took place. The doctor sternly tells us this needs to end. We can't keep living like this. It's the end of the line. You realize this is the truth as your finger lingers over the stop button on the tape recorder. You pressure it down, and as it springs back up, everything goes pitch black.
Well, I think we've made progress today, Mr. Asian. I guess we should tell the police what you've told us. Although I don't suspect they'll take you anywhere. I think you'll be with us for quite some time. Come on, let's get you back to your shows. I'll see you tomorrow.
As the intro fades back in, we come to a realization of what's just happened. The information we've just obtained. As much as this is the end of the game for us, this is the end of the line for James. He can't keep going like this, physically or mentally. This is truly the end. Wow, that was a lot to take in. I think I need a second. While I recompose, let's hear Markiplier's expert and genius opinion on the matter.
Okay, that was awesome. What a grim story, but I love it. I love that it commits to the grimness of it. Oh, the character isn't someone who deserves redemption. He's going through hell, and he kind of deserves it. Oh, it's so crazy. It all makes sense in a weird way. God, that's insane. It set it up from the very beginning, and I love that. Such a unique way to tell a story. That was so fun. That was so fun. That was insanity. I loved that. That was so good. God damn, that was good.
I honestly think he said it really well. What a great way to tell a story. Stories Untold is a game unlike any others I've seen in recent years, and it shouldn't go unnoticed. It's put together in such a way that you notice new things on every playthrough. They put things in the game that are so difficult to spot, probably anyone that wasn't slowing down the clip couldn't put it together, and yet it's there anyways. Something for everyone, I guess. Let me just say, this game is not for the faint-hearted. It features stories of trauma unlike any I've shared, but possibly to the extent of some of you out there. It also features puzzles that seem fucking impossible when you're an absolute dunce like me. What? But if you're willing to get past all that, and you don't have epilepsy, which by the way they should probably have some type of warning in the description of the game, that's alright. It is what it is. Honestly though, this game is phenomenal. It's really nice to play such a nice looking game, especially when they could have gotten away with it being 8-bit and saying it's the aesthetic of the time frame. The story was very well written and a big surprise. Although some of us may have seen something was up, putting together some of the pieces from the different episodes before being clearly told, but I think that's part of the experience. They gave you the pieces, maybe you figured it out, maybe you didn't. Either way, we're going to have a mind-boggling twist at the end of the game that's going to make your heart sink as you realize all along, you were the bad guy. To conclude this video, I much enjoyed dissecting this game. NoCode did an exceptional job putting it together, and the little details made all the difference. Like in the hospital, where the poster says, driving? Maybe you don't have that 5th pint. Although this seems insane now, thinking that the blood alcohol level is 0.05, back then it was doubled, making this seem more reasonable. All in all, the game was easily a 10 out of 10, with minimal issues and bugs that are seemingly fixed. I'm looking forward to more projects like this coming out of NoCode, as I know they had a release in 2020 that looked promising, Now hopefully they keep working and improving their craft. Everything just came together perfectly for Stories Untold, and it really worked out. If you enjoyed watching, let me know by liking the video, and let me know what I can do to improve the quality. I hope you all have a good night. See you next time.